All right, well, we have about 50 people online, so I think I'm going to get started with just the intro and some basic admin items. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope everyone is managing to stay safe and healthy and connected with everyone during this, in Vancouver at least, our second little lockdown. My name is Jessica. I'm part of the programming and steering committees for Women in Architecture in Vancouver. I've been part of it for a couple of years now, and I'm really enjoying having this opportunity to contribute to our local architectural dialogue. For those of you who are new to Women in Architecture events, we are an organization that works to promote women in architecture and the related design fields through showcasing the work of women-led practices like we are tonight with Holst, or providing education and professional development events and trying to get in some networking and resources for everyone. We're entirely volunteer run, and we are always welcoming new volunteers. So if anyone is inspired after joining us tonight and you want to pitch in some time, please connect with us through our website, wiavancouver.org. And we're looking for people, basically, if you have an idea for events, you want to help planning events, you want to help with communications, any kind of special initiatives, we have a lot available for volunteering. For tonight, just with this webinar, as I've said a few times now, you can enter your AIBC number in the chat and we'll submit those for you. And if any of you are joining us from somewhere outside of BC, please just enter your name in the chat or write a comment just so we have a record that you've attended. So if you need that for self-submitting your education credits, then we have a record of it. So tonight is a sort of a webinar presentation, and we'll have a Q&A with the presenters at the end of their presentations. So please enter any questions in the Q&A dialogue and we'll go through them at the end. All right, on to the main event. So over the last year, we've had a series of events looking at collaboration in all different aspects in the architectural practice. And tonight we're really happy to have Holst Architecture joining us. We have owner and principal Renée Strand, senior associate Renée Strand, and associate Yuki Bowman, all joining us from Portland. And we invited Holst to do an event with us because their work really integrates lots of the elements of collaboration that we've talked about over the last few months. And it illustrates what you can achieve when you're pulling that all together and putting it into practice. And as a bonus, they are the largest woman-owned and disadvantaged business in the state of Oregon. So Holst's work spans a big range of project types, basically all different sectors, and all of it is executed with a priority for the client's needs, environmental and social responsibility, and a very high aesthetic standard. The intentional approach is reflected not just in their built projects, but also the process and the culture of the practice. And this year, Holst won the AIA's Firm of the Year Award for Northwest and Pacific region, recognizing their commitment to building well and building equitably, both in terms of what they create and how they do that. So big congratulations to all of you at Holst. We're really happy to have you here, and we're looking forward to hearing a bit more about how you managed to achieve all of that. So I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Jessica, for those introductions and for the opportunity to talk with you all today. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Perfect. All right. Well, I'm Renée Strand. I'm one of the owners and principal at Holst, as Jessica mentioned, and my colleagues Renée Strand and Yuki Bowman are here as well, somewhere on your screen. And we're just really excited to be here, both to introduce you to our firm, but also to talk about our work and our practice. It's not every day, but it's always a treat for us to present to fellow architects and AEC community members. So let's see. I want to give you a little bit of history and information about us since we're not local, and I'm not sure how many folks on the call have ever heard about Holst. But as mentioned, we're a woman-owned architecture firm. We have about 40 professionals in the office, and we're based in Portland. And we do work on a wide range of projects, primarily in the Pacific Northwest, but really varied in scale. Currently on the boards, we have everything from a single family residence to a performing arts center. We do a lot of housing and a lot of affordable housing as well. So for those of you who have been to Portland, and it sounds like Kate has frequently, we're based in the Central East Side, and we've recently moved into a new office before COVID, but which you can sort of see in the backgrounds here, but we've been working exclusively from home since March, which I'm sure many of you have been as well. So, right. So we like to say at Holst that we're devoted to creating architecture that our clients love. And by clients, we think of that not only as, you know, all the great organizations we work for, do public, private, and nonprofit work, but also the communities and the neighborhoods that engage the spaces that we're able to design. And occasionally we do get to be our own client, like these virtual backgrounds of our office. The ethos of our firm is that we're always striving to make a positive social and environmental impact with our work. And while we do like to explore architectural possibilities pretty intensely and push innovation, our reputation has really been built on doing that while maintaining what are often very tight budgets and schedules, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with as well. So the topic today is design collaboration. And architecture, as you all know, takes effective communication and cooperation as well as design acumen to do the things that we all love to do within those budgets and schedules I mentioned. So we plan to talk about, for the next maybe 60 minutes or so, well, we're not going to focus exclusively on collaboration with our partners outside the firm, although we are going to take a look at the work. But we want to talk about collaboration during the design process inside the firm as well. So we're kind of going to look at both sides. So I plan to give you a little history of Holst and how we got to where we are in terms of leadership and portfolio. Our leadership has been very focused on improving collaboration in the office in recent years. And then Yuki, wherever you are on the screen, is going to talk about some of the tools and processes that we've developed around collaboration within our practice, including our collaborative design process, our CDP, and some of the benefits of collaboration that have become evident during this work. And then Ray, wherever you are, is going to lead the final portion of the talk today, which is taking a look at slices from a number of our projects and what we feel is an interesting kind of point of collaboration on each of them. This part of the talk is going to be more focused on collaboration outside of the firm. And you all know it takes a lot of dedicated parties to get a project built. We feel we have a great history of collaboration with our clients, contractors, craftsmen, communities, all of those. But we're really excited to kind of showcase the work and share it with collaboration as a lens. We really haven't done this before. So this has been a really fun exercise for us to go through and sort of work through together. So why collaboration? I hope our why of collaboration becomes evident to all of you as we talk about our process. But I'd say that overall, we want to create a design process and a space at Holst that not only brings diverse voices to the table, but engages them as an active part of the creative process. I will say that collaboration takes hard work, a lot of hard work, especially the part that involves 40 of us designing and documenting buildings together these days over Zoom and screens. And I want to be upfront and honest that this practice is messy and it's evolving, and we're certainly still honing our process. But we're really excited to sort of share it with all of you tonight. We do think that a focus on collaboration in a practice is crucial. We think it is the best path to innovation. It's the best path to allowing our staff to grow in their careers. And it's a way to help move architecture forward, just to be a more equitable profession. And obviously, it's one of the keys to ensuring our communities get the best designs possible. So a little bit of history about our firm. Holst began 28 years ago with founding partners Jeff Storer and John Holmes working in their attic, which ironically is now what I'm doing. Back then with drafting boards and I think one computer. And so if you put their last names together, Holmes and Storer, you get Holst. That's where our name came from. Let's see, from 1992, which you'll see on the left side of the slide, until 2017, about where we have labeled transition. We grew steadily, and with that continued growth, we were able to sort of year after year take on increasingly diverse and complex projects. So the staff growth, sort of tracked with the portfolio. And then about 4 years ago, we went through a leadership transition where those two founding partners retired. There was some more growth. And my partners, Kim Wilson, Dave Oddie, and Kevin Volk took over the reins. And also in 2017, we became a certified woman-owned business. We had some more growth. And since then, we've been doing great work. We've been working hard to kind of evolve and actively improve the practice, along with all of our awesome colleagues like Ray and Yuki. And if for any reason anyone else from Holst called in today, hello, welcome. So before the transition took place and kind of central to its success, our firm underwent a few years of strategic planning, which I want to talk about. So this was initially a result of some growing pains coming out of the recession, kind of growing a little faster than we had before and finding ourselves taking on larger and I guess more substantial projects in a pretty short amount of time. We were finding that kind of what worked for sort of a small, scrappy group of really good designers really needed to be refined and to make it work for more than 36 people now. So that strategic planning work was definitely needed, but it gave us a really great structure and then an opportunity to kind of reflect on our practice and intentionally focus on where we were going. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the strategic planning process, but there were 3 strategies that emerged that I think are really relevant to our practice around collaboration and what we're also going to be talking about tonight. So the first one is we created an org chart. This might seem obvious, but we had never had one before. So that's what you see on the left. And it's intentionally not kind of a top-down tree, but instead a circular sort of a dial. And it wraps around our shared values as a firm. And the intent of the org chart is really to give us focus and clarity in the office rather than a prescriptive hierarchy. So the org chart that you see, it shows how our project teams are set up, which is kind of shown on the bottom of the dial, and then how our business is supported, which is here on top. So second, we wrote down our core values, kind of what those, all of those people at Holst are sort of wrapped around. And while these have evolved and kind of been honed over time, they're currently passion with perspective, intuition with precision, and equity with action. And so those have been really central and important in the office. And third, we established a series of committees at Holst. Yuki is going to talk about the design committee shortly, but these committees really improved our communication, have continued to improve our communication, our accountability, and also our feedback loops in the office, which has been really good. Everybody at Holst is on a committee. Sometimes people are on 2, occasionally people are on 3. And the members, Yuki's smiling because I think she might be on at least 3. Maybe 4, I don't know. So the committees evolve. We change and have new committees form as needed, and committees that aren't needed anymore go away. And the members also change over time, and you have the opportunity to switch committees or join more committees. And so since our strategic planning started, we've looked at a number of different things. I mean, everything from tech, infrastructure, sustainability, equity, culture. I'm not going to remember all of them. Office sports. But all of those groups have sort of spent time digging into things that needed to be dug into and refining things like our design process, looking at how to better align responsibility with authority, power dynamics, project roles, and even team staffing. And so the work that's come out of those committees has been central to the collaboration we're talking about and improvement of the firm and the firm leadership over the years. All right, so also to note, and to kind of tie together what was happening at Holst 4 to 5 years ago, as we simultaneously had strategic planning work going on, sustained growth in the firm, and this transition in leadership underway, we started focusing on 2 developments in our practice, which is sort of the slide that you're seeing now. First, we were intentionally diversifying our portfolio. And then second, we were simultaneously starting to kind of open up our design process. And while I would say that both of those could be tall orders for leadership and collaboration, we've found them one of the keys to our success over the last few years, and really important elements as we all focus back on those shared values from that last slide. So in terms of design process, historically, if we start back in the attic, historically as a firm with two owners, there was more of a top-down approach to design, but as we expanded, it's become really clear to our leadership group that to sustain innovation and quality with the growth, we need to focus on opening up the design process and engaging more voices at Holst. As for our portfolio, you can see on this slide how we were able to diversify as we grew. Here we're showing Holst in 2010 to the left, and then where we are today to the right. And that was very intentional. We've been able to take on more varied projects with the growth, larger projects. And I will say that because the new typologies often require, I guess, broader thinking, it's paired really well with our efforts in evolving our design process. So before I hand off to Yuki, who is going to talk about our philosophy and tools in the practice, I do want to make one other kind of clarifying point. So while we've been doing some really hard work around improving collaboration in our practice, and we do have all of these committees that have been central to our improvement, including the design committee, I guess when we talk about collaboration in our design process, I want to make clear that we're not talking about design by committee. We're talking about a more democratic and inclusive process where essentially the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, where these committees can be used to help develop tools and processes to then support the designers and their work. This way we can achieve what we at Holst call the best design, which Yuki's also going to talk about, and we can continue to push for innovation. And I think that we all know as architects that we can do that much more successfully as a collective than we can as an individual. So I think with that, I'm going to pass the torch.
Thanks, Renee. Can everyone hear me? Great. My name is Yuki. I've been at Holst for almost 3 years now. And I am going to speak a little bit about some of the internal firm initiatives that we've instituted in the past 3 years. And then obviously there was a lot of legwork before those 3 years going into that, and how these practices have helped us practice collaboration. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge that we're not necessarily hardwired to collaborate well. I want to credit Deeper Funner with this this understanding that, you know, there's a part of our brain that's really geared towards a quick reaction to anything that we perceive as a threat or anxiety inducing or complex. And so really the question for us is, how do we acknowledge that it's human to sometimes react before thinking, but then B, implement frameworks where we can continually practice trying to override that response so that we can work together really well. The part of that work is understanding that we need to reframe the idea of failure in these interactions, not as something to be avoided, but as something that really provides an opportunity for learning. So the three internal initiatives I'm going to talk about that Renée has already alluded to are our community agreements, our collaborative design process, which I'll shorthand as CDP just because it's a little bit lengthy, and then in-house design conversations. And I'll go into each of these in a little more detail over the next few slides. The community agreements really started about, I would say, overall two years ago, a little more than that, when we initially brought in an outside equity consultant to lead some workshops with us. The culmination of our time with that consultant was to develop a document that really set the ground for how we wanted to communicate and also repair when there were interactions, going back to that first slide, that didn't go the way we had hoped or intended. The community agreements we really understand as a list of tools for enacting that repair, and it's really about establishing a shared language for how we hope to interact in the future. After a year, we revisited the initial set of agreements that we established and asked ourselves, do these reflect how we're practicing? Do they really reflect our culture? Recognizing that it's a living document and that it might take some revision and refinement as we move into the future. So about a year, let's see, summer, a year and a half ago now, we started this process of asking those questions, and through a series of all staff workshops, and then also a series of small group workshops, and now a dedicated work group, we have been engaging in a revision process that's actually about to draw to a close, which is really exciting. But we do want to acknowledge that even when we get to the second draft, it's really just a stepping stone in what we see to be an evolving conversation about whether the values that we put down in this document reflect who we are in an authentic way. When we started the revision process for the community agreements, one thing we did realize was that we had to redefine for ourselves what we thought the word consensus meant. In the beginning, there was some, what's the right word? There was some negotiation around whether we had to agree on every single word and every single agreement, and whether every single person in the firm had to use each agreement the same amount and love each agreement the same amount. And what we really decided was that we wanted to embrace the fact that everyone approaches the tools differently, and everyone is drawn to certain tools over other tools. So the definition of consensus that would allow us how to evaluate each agreement as we discussed it was the following. I agree that this tool is appropriate and supportive of our common goals. We found this definition to be really helpful in our discussions because it puts the emphasis on the common goal, and it's a way to look at not just a tool in terms of the community agreements, but also design decisions. It kind of takes this element of subjective taste out of it, and it puts the focus on whether the question at hand is really facilitating the group goal that you're all working towards. The next internal initiative that we've instituted in the fall of 2018, around the same time that we were also developing the community agreements, is this collaborative design process. And this is really a collective and staff-owned initiative that was spearheaded by the design committee, which was once called the design process committee. But part of that committee's evolution was to recognize that design process is not one thing. It's not something that we define and dictate and hand down and disseminate, but it's actually something very organic. It arises out of each team's unique set of individuals, the way each team communicates, the way each team designs together. And so these meetings are a 2 to 3 month, they happen every 2 to 3 months, and they really give the team a chance to sit down and talk about how they're working together, both addressing questions of individual fulfillment on the team, and then questions around group goal setting, whether people are feeling like they are learning what they want to learn on the team, whether their communication patterns that are working really well are not working really well. So in its broadest sense, it's really a place to practice communicating honestly and productively with each other. And that practice actually feeds back into our design work together as a team. So it's a very positive feedback loop. All the meetings are moderated by other staff members, so there's a very horizontal sense of ownership over this the CDP meetings, and all the teams do them. And so once you enter the room, you sit down, you read the community agreements, and it's a completely level playing field inside the meeting room where the CDPs happen. The last thing is a little more informal. These are just ways that design committee and leadership have tried to implement informal and fun platforms for furthering design discussions and really allowing all teams to learn about the work that other teams are doing. One platform where we do this is called Skull Sessions. I want to credit Lauren Bruni, my colleague, for bringing this to Holst. But it's a way for a team to open the moment that they're in their individual project up to the whole staff to get fresh-eyed feedback, and also for all members of the team to have a chance to practice presentation skills. The Studio Drop-In series is the other informal platform. This is more recent. This is a little less focused on problem solving and a little more focused on acknowledging the current working from home situation, trying to use the tools such as concept board that have really been bolstering our practice through this unusual time. And it's a little more open-ended. Teams can just show snapshots of what they're trying to work through currently on items such as detailing or photos of CA. It extends beyond design projects, and we found it to be a great place to talk about community values, for example, or as you can see here, VE blues. Next. And I'm just going to do one little snapshot of how collaboration works on an individual team, and I will use my team as an example since it's what I am most familiar with right now. But I think any team that you ask at Holst might have a slightly different take on this, but I think there are three things on my team that seem to be emerging as really facilitating a collaborative design process. And I want to sort of frame that within the larger acknowledgement that we're very lucky to have a toolkit currently of softwares that allow us to communicate and collaborate easily, such as Teams, Microsoft Teams. I'm sure there are other platforms that everybody's using right now, BIM 360 through Revit, and OneNote, obviously. Anything that allows simultaneous, quick back and forth organization of thoughts and ideas has been completely critical during this time of working from home. But in a more intangible way, I think we've sort of shifted, as Renee mentioned, from this phrase of best idea wins to best idea, and somehow removing that word wins keeps the conversation open. There's something about winning that is very goal-oriented and sort of shuts the process down a little bit and tends to pin it to a person for the duration of a project. Whereas if you say best idea, there's an acknowledgement that there's a little bit of ambiguity and contextual specificity about that best idea. This best idea might work for this client and this context and this period, but it's not the universal best idea that kind of winner takes all mentality. Concept and narrative versus taste is another thing that has really helped my team of 8 or so people working on a very large project develop a consistent set of expectations around what to work towards in terms of an architectural language. I think taste is always going to be highly subjective among a group of individuals, whether we're designers or not. And so for the Performing Arts Center in Oregon that I'm working on right now, there are many different program pieces. It's a very complex set of conditions that we're dealing with. And so we spent a lot of time in early SD trying to come up with a strong and consistent story for the building. And I think spending that time early on really allowed us to develop a concept that everybody could understand and buy into. What that then allows each person to do is to take a piece of the program or piece of the building and work on it and sort of evaluate the design decisions relative to that concept rather than in terms of an individual and incidental question of taste. And then the last thing, going back to this use of concept board that I alluded to earlier, really trying to evolve production away from presentation and more towards a way to converse. Not that presentation is not important. We all have crunch times when we're getting ready for a client meeting or a deliverable. But concept board, while we do really miss the sort of being in the office together and all of those tactile, tangible elements of practicing architecture, one nice thing about it is that it's a very flat, large screen, and there's something about the ease with which you can just throw ideas up, whether they're extremely informal and not figured out at all, or whether it's a very polished image. Something about the flatness of that field gives all of those ideas kind of an equal value. And it allows other people to enter your thought process when your sketch is very informal at an early phase of your thinking. And then they can adopt some of those ideas and iterate on them, and it becomes a really productive back and forth way to design, excuse me, to design together. Next. So benefits of collaboration, I think there's probably 100 items on this list, if not more. But in terms of what we're starting to observe at Holst, I think there's 4 different scales at which we're starting to see some of the benefits. At the individual level, I think having passion and ownership of design ideas leads to a sense of well-being and empowerment within your work and your professional growth. At the team and firm level, greater collaboration and involvement in a project really bolsters skill and leadership growth, so it creates resilience. At the level of the architectural field, I think talking about design is it can really feel vulnerable at times, not just talking about design, but sharing one's own design ideas. So opening up, as I had mentioned earlier, a space where failure is reframed as a learning opportunity, whether in conversation or in terms of brainstorming, has deepened our design conversation. And then beyond Holst and beyond the profession, practicing collaboratively within the firm allows us to work better with the community, with our stakeholders, and shifts the idea of the architect as a translator, shifts the idea of the architect as an author more towards the architect as a translator. So now I'm going to hand it off to Renée Strand, and she is going to talk about some slices of projects where we've engaged different aspects of collaboration.
Hi, everyone. I'm Renée Strand, and I've been with Holst for almost 8 years now. It's been always an awesome place to work, and I really love that we not only do we talk about collaboration at the firm, but we get to share that with you all tonight. So the next portion of this presentation is about, as we said, slices of collaboration, and we've taken what we think to be some of the best parts or the most evident parts of collaboration on different projects to share them with you, and a little bit more about how that's worked for each one. The first two projects that I'm going to talk about are slices of cite, we're calling them, and they're examples of establishing partnerships to realize a project. This first one is One North, which is a commercial office building in Portland. And this is a repeat client. This was, I think, the second project that we had done with this client. And he came to us inspired by Gaudi and posed a question kind of like, why do all buildings have to be rectilinear? So he wanted us to kind of push these limits of form, which was an interesting thing. You know, it had worked the inverse way where we had come up with this design to show it to a client. As you all probably know, like a lot of clients would be kind of scared off by something like this, but it was a challenge for us to move forward with. The project is actually 2 buildings that are about 80,000 square feet, and they're separated by a large public courtyard. And at the same time that One North came about, we also had been talking to a creative agency in town called Instrument, and they were looking for a new space for their office and for all their creative workforce. Both owners were facing challenges on their projects. Instrument was having a hard time finding the right space for them, and One North was having a hard time finding tenants, like an anchor tenant for the space. So we introduced them to each other, which is what made this project work. The Instrument office space is in 3 floors of the East Building, which is what you're seeing here in the background. And we are excited about this project, obviously, because the collaboration worked in terms of this design challenge that came to us became real, and that happened once the developer and the tenant connection was made. The next one that I'm going to talk about, kind of in a similar fashion, is also about cite. And this slice is about 3 agencies coming together on the Rockwood Youth Campus, all on one site, all in need of new space, but none of them had the financial means to make it work on their own. Open School is an alternative school for grades 7 through 12. Boys and Girls Club is a national organization that hosts over after-school programs for young people and New Avenues. Their focus is on the prevention and intervention of homeless youth. Holst had been selected to design a new facility for Open School back in 2009. They needed to move because the people that they were serving really had, the needs had shifted to a different part of town. So they kind of needed to follow these people and place the services where they would be most utilized. but a new build was proving to be really expensive for them. They weren't sure how they were going to make that work. So we were just kind of like waiting for the right synergy of things to come together so that we could design this project for them. And then we interviewed for Boys and Girls Club. They were moving out of a long-time location for similar reasons. They needed to kind of move services to be more central to the population that needed them the most. And they had found a site, but it was too big, and but it was in an, excuse me, they found the site too big, but it was in the service area that they wanted. So it was like each piece was kind of coming together. So we introduced the two of these agencies. Not only could they share the site, but they had complementary program pieces that they could share. So the cafeteria, the gym, the assembly space, and the sharing ended up working really well because Boys and Girls Club is an before and after school program, and the school, of course, is operating during the day. So this didn't get conflict with any of the needs that the school had. This collaboration provides great benefit to young people in an area that they need it most. The next couple of projects are really about collaboration of a design vision. And this first one is about helping define a design vision and a brand identity for the Miletus Beverage Company. The Miletus Beverage headquarters are located in Portland. This is a picture from the original building built back in the 90s. They're on a 9-acre site in an industrial part of Portland. They have this office space, which is kind of this corner that you see up front, and then they have 100,000 square feet of cold storage. This is where all their drivers are coming in to make deliveries for the products. This is where their sales force is coming in, where all the office space is. This is a family business. And they came to us when Rob, who's pictured in the center here, the second generation, was looking to pass the reins to his two sons and offered the renovation of a space to them to represent who they were and show this love of the company and of the industry. And I'm sure it went something like, hey, do you guys want a really cool office space? Like, come work for me and we will do this. So that's what happened. These are photos that, although they look like they were taken also in the 90s, they were not. These were recent photos from before we renovated the project. And as you can see, it was in dire need of an update. Just really underutilized space, a lot of really tall cubicles, and a sales room, which is actually a pretty active space. None of the sales people have their own desk space. They're all coming into this sales room to do their work and kind of touching down. This sales room was tucked way in the back by the warehouse and just hadn't been given much attention. In one of the early design concepts, what we proposed was to move the sales room kind of front and center, and we likened it to their delivery trucks, these side loader trucks. It's the style of truck that they use to do all their deliveries around town. And they were really drawn to this idea, and the thought that they could kind of like showcase this more active space up front was attractive to them. And they had kind of decided not only to use it for their sales people, but realized that they could also utilize it to be kind of an event space. So this is the main first space that you see when you walk in the front door. Then we actually moved their office space upstairs. It had previously been some of their kind of underutilized warehouse space. It wasn't part of the cold storage. It was just a warehouse space. And this being an industrial building in an industrial area, we stripped it down so you can see the nature of the structure and really see kind of some of the things that the building had to offer already there. They converted to an open office, which was kind of a stretch for them. They had been used to those really tall cubicles, but we balanced that with a lot of different kind of quiet spaces or amenity spaces where they could convene and have little meetings if they wanted to. Like this, we called this a meeting pod, and this is a freestanding open air room in the middle of the space. And we continued some of this industrial detailing with these big sliding doors and even some small details like trimming out the sidewalls of a skylight and copper copper being a material found in some traditional beer making equipment. And for the rest of the space, we took things that they see every day and just kind of elevated them. So we turned these kind of mundane things that line all their shelves and really started to showcase those things. So we have this kind of keg wall that we had in a really active space is visible from the reception area. And this bottle screen. And a funny story at this point, the bottle screen always makes me think of this, which is that we had given them the budget that we got from the contractor when they priced out our schematic design drawings. And the budget was pretty high, and we were pretty nervous, thinking like, oh, we're gonna face some serious VE for this project. And we were all sitting down in the conference room, and Rob said, well, did you get all the cool stuff in? Like, did you get the keg wall and the bottle wall? Did you get the outdoor space and the brewery in the back? And we said, yeah, that was all in there. That's, that's part of why it was more expensive. And he said, oh, that's great. Here, let me go get a case of beer for everybody. And sent one of his employees out, and we all went home with beer. Lucky for us, there is a retail space also in the building, so we can always just drop by and get more cases of beer. The great thing about the collaboration of this space is that they were really proud of this space when it was done. It really felt like them, and it felt like home. And we, of course, were really proud as well. So the next example that I have is design vision, but kind of the opposite of what I was just talking about, where someone came to us and has a very strong design vision, and that's Nike. Nike has a really large campus close to Portland, maybe 20 minutes away in Beaverton, 285 acres and 75 buildings. And one of the original campus buildings was called Dan Fouts. He's an American football player who played for the San Diego Chargers for most of his career. And we redid the workspace here. This is the ground floor that contains some more of the more active space. There's other office space on the upper floors, and some of it's open office, but a lot of this is kind of non-traditional workspace. It's like every space you could work at, and it provides varying levels of activity and atmosphere and noise. One of the things that we encountered when we were working on this project with them is that they have things that they're really proud of, and they should be. These innovative things. They do a lot of research and development on materials, high performance materials, and then of course they have kind of these iconic shoes. One of the things that they had wanted to incorporate at one point is the bottom of this waffle shoe, which is kind of an icon for them. In the rest of the space, we incorporated elements that kind of harken back to a stadium. So raw plywood and corrugated metal, concrete, and little touches like this, the signage that looks kind of like a scoreboard. And we learned pretty quickly that they have a really strong design language that they use to talk to each other about design. And that was something different for us because, us as architects, we kind of have our own language that we're used to. So it was really about understanding some of the terminology that they use to describe things and adopting that as our kind of new lexicon. They would use adjectives like stadium, hub, and community, words that don't necessarily always describe space, but the way that they would use it was that this was not stadium enough, or this was not hub enough. So that was kind of an interesting insight into their company and their process to get kind of a taste of that. And we had some fun with them in terms of what we got to do. This is one room, one space, meeting room space that was dedicated to Dan Fouts and football. And we had fun with a lot of the different elements in here. We also did the entire furniture package for the building. So that was an interesting part of this project. And one thing that I wanted to highlight in this that was a fun collaboration was finding a rug to go in this space. They wanted something custom. And so we talked about, does the rug look like a football play diagram? Or we found this rug that's pictured here in the middle where the rug designer had traced all of the marks that a soccer player made on a field and overlaid that onto kind of a more traditional looking rug. And in the end, we ended up with something that looks pretty close translation to a football field, but they were really happy with the space, and so were we. So the collaboration on this, it was really great to have this strong design vision that they had. And with this space, we feel like it even more so showcases their brand and their identity. I'm now going to turn it over to Renee, and she's going to talk about the next slice of craft.
Excellent. Thank you, Ray. So I have two projects I'm going to show and sort of talk about more of small scale craft elements of each. So the first one is Revere. Revere is a 211 unit market rate multifamily project here in Portland. It has some ground floor retail, a small restaurant, has live work units with front stoops down along the sidewalk. And then it's got a large community co-working amenity space that opens up to the street on the ground floor. The project, it sits at the end of Mississippi Street in North Portland. Mississippi is a quaint, very walkable neighborhood community street. And you can flip to the next slide, Ray. We started working on this project actually a long time ago. And when we started working on the feasibility study, which had to be at least 10 years ago, the site was actually an empty lot. And it was used as sort of a de facto park for the neighborhood. The buildings on the site had burned down about 50 years ago, and remaining were just a few trees, and there were concrete staircases leading up from the sidewalk. And so the slice from this project that I want to highlight related to collaboration actually centers around a tree on the site. I guess not just any tree, but a huge walnut tree that you see here that was sort of a neighborhood icon and kind of a popular hangout spot. It even sported a tire swing that had some Vimeos posted about it, and it had its own YouTube channel for a while. So it was a very important tree in the neighborhood. When we started on the project, we first started looking at massing up the building on the south side to preserve an open area at the north and keep the tree. But as the design process progressed and we had arborists evaluating the tree, it was determined it was pretty unhealthy. It had a big split down the trunk and maybe had about 10 years before it was going to need to come down. So in honor of the tree and sort of to honor the site a little bit, and that tree's popularity in the neighborhood, we worked with the contractor to have it taken down and milled for reuse. We've actually had this done now on a couple of Holst projects, but a portion of the wood was given to a furniture maker who lives in the neighborhood, actually right across the street from the project to the west, and he does a lot of local work. And then we set aside a portion of the dried wood and wanted to create kind of a special piece for the project. So actually the project architect for Holst for this job is, he's also a skilled woodworker. And so he created a large table for the project, designed and built it himself. And it's located in the community room on the ground floor. And so now the owner has made this room available to the neighborhood they're able to reserve it for community meetings if they like. And so there's this sort of little piece of the tree still on the site and remains, an opportunity for people to still occasionally connect with it, just in sort of a different form. So this is the Fowler. The Fowler is another recent multifamily residential project of ours, this time in Boise, Idaho. And at the time of construction, it was Boise's first new market rate multifamily project in around 20 years. The city's been booming ever since. There's a ton of new projects. But it was our first project in Boise as well. So as we started designing in the Boise market, we were struck by a number of the old historic buildings downtown and their use of this very simple stone down at the base. It's a stone that consistently has these raked tool marks. And the story we were told was that how that raking came to be relates to how they're mined and finished. But it's a pretty compelling material. At the same time, Boise is known for having quite a bit of stucco and actually really good stucco. And that was a material that was more in line with our budget on the project. So as part of this process, Kim Wilson from our office actually created a series of trowels at home on her grinder to test out a variety of different raked stucco textures for our design team to evaluate. And we were actually able to work with the subcontractor and the stucco craftsman on the project to have them replicate dozens of these custom trowels for the project. So it was a really great method of collaboration. And in the end, we were able to, kind of the image on the far right, create what we think is a really striking stucco over cement board base to the building, sort of a modern interpretation of that historic stone base on a lot of those downtown buildings, but this time sort of using a modern local craft for the work. And then I am going to pass it along to Yuki.
Thanks, Renee. This will be the last project that we talk about in terms of these collaborative slices. This will focus on collaboration with an international team with a focus on improving sustainability in building and also taking inspiration and cues from local craft. This project is a library that is part of a larger national law school in the country of Bhutan. It's in the city of Paro, overlooking the valley below. And it came to us very fortuitously through a repeat client who actually lives in Oregon, who's very, very passionate about sustainability and also very passionate about Bhutan. When he heard that this law school was being built, he saw an opportunity to use the library part of the campus as a showcase for better energy efficiency in Bhutanese building practice. The blue arrow points to the library component of this larger law school campus. There were some architectural directives, obviously, that came with building in Bhutan. The building code there dictates that any new building engage very strongly with traditional Buddhist architectural heritage. So we proposed a pretty simple massing that had some key elements from traditional Bhutanese architecture, such as the thick battered walls rendered in plaster, the protruding wood rabsol, which is the large wood element that you see, and then this very expansive flying roof that covers the whole structure. And this took inspiration from the traditional Dzong architecture of Bhutan. Dzong was an administrative fortress. Next slide. So understanding that we wanted to integrate traditional Bhutanese architecture with a more energy efficient envelope, we asked how we could use the means and methods available in the country and introduce a pretty simple strategy of warming the envelope. Traditional buildings are stone and wood, have openings in the facade that actually didn't have glazing. They would either be covered with a solid panel or in the summertime would be left completely open to the air. Excuse me. So our strategy was to insert a continuous layer of exterior mineral wool insulation all around the envelope, except at the windows, obviously, where we're installing insulated glazing units. And then inboard of the continuous layer of insulation is a weather barrier, which is the line in red on the right. There were some other elements around building technology for which we had to collaborate closely with makers and manufacturers in Bhutan. One thing this project does that is different from a traditional building is use a wood truss to create the geometry of the flying roof, which would typically be built with very heavy timber, post and beam structure, but recognizing the just the supply of wood available and their very rigorous forestry practices, we wanted to use a more efficient structural method for building the roof. So we're using wood trusses, as you can see in the upper row of photographs. They're all being, or they're already built, but they were built on site using local lumber and engineered by our consultant here in the US and Alaska. The middle row of photos illustrates the introduction of glulam members. The left into the country of the first couple projects to use glulams. The photos on the left is actually not our project. It's a project down the road, but also a royally sponsored academic institution. Recognizing that we could work together, we helped provide equipment to a local factory that typically would cut lumber, and the equipment allowed them to start building glulams domestically. So the glulams on our project are going to function as the columns in the large double height space that really forms the heart of the library spatially. In terms of the glazing units, we looked far and wide for a way to source insulated glazing units. In Bhutan, the closest suppliers were in India, but due to climate and elevational changes, we realized that these would fail if they were brought to site. So there are no domestic manufacturers when this project started, and we found a local glass manufacturer that agreed to basically assemble the insulated glazing units. We sourced the glass from one supplier, and then this fabricator is putting the spacers between the glass units and finishing the unit, the whole IG unit itself, which are in the process of getting installed on site. For the operable units, we we worked with our Bhutanese partners to find a wood window and door fabricator who could adopt the use of a router to get the profile for an operable window. And so those machine equipment pieces have been imported into Bhutan, and they are working on cutting those window profiles currently. In terms of the interior design language, there are a few key opportunities within the building itself that we're really excited to look to traditional Bhutanese culture as inspiration for, and also work very closely with our client here in Oregon. There's a large triple height stairwell that has a single continuous vertical wall that's really an open canvas for some kind of display. We looked to traditional Bhutanese textiles as inspiration for what we might be able to do with this wall. Next slide. And we also took a cue from vernacular materials, which we found and were inspired by just driving around the country. There's a lot of wood elements out drying and stacked and in various patterns, diamonds, linear, vertical, horizontal. There's also a very rich woodcraft tradition in Bhutan. And as I mentioned before, this deep heritage of hand-woven textiles that is a key cultural interest of our Oregon client. So combining all of these beautiful textures and colors. Next slide, please. We thought about this triple story wall as a three-dimensional series of stacked end grain wood blocks. And what began in the beginning is, what began as just normally oriented stacked blocks in the 90-degree direction evolved over time. First, they were rotated to recall the diamond patterns of Bhutanese textiles. And then the client actually asked the great question when he was on site of whether those blocks could be arranged to describe larger patterns within the wall. So then we worked with the Bhutanese craftspeople on site to do a series of tests for how that pattern might get arranged. We did maybe 8 or 10 different options on site very quickly and with a high degree of precision. Next. And what we landed on was a version called the diamond wave. And you can see the executed wall on the right. It basically creates a repeating soft pattern that undulates over this tall wall. And it was built by hand over a course of 2 or 3 months. And it's just amazing what the dedicated craftspeople on site were able to accomplish. I think something like this in the US would probably require a lot of machine cutting to execute with the same amount of precision and care. Next slide. And then just to wrap it up, that design exercise that we went through with the client and that was facilitated by the high skill of the craftspeople then fed back into the other central space of the project, which is this double-story reading room. And recognizing that we're working with the same square shape of a carpet tile, we realized that if we just rotated them and then studied a variety of different patterns and colors, we could create a larger carpet that, again, got its inspiration from the tradition of the Bhutanese textiles. I'm gonna hand it off to Ray.
Yeah, with this, this is our last slice, and this is a really quick in-house project that that we do, and it's a really fun one for us because it's collaboration, but it's collaboration only with our fellow Holst people that we work with, our colleagues. This is the Winter Lights Festival, which is held every winter in downtown Portland. Submissions are open to artists and designers, and Holst has participated a few years running. It's open for, internally in the firm, it's open for anyone who wants to participate. We put the call out every year. It's usually a lot of time, so it's like whoever is not under deadlines, those are the people that usually end up working together. But it's great because it ends up mixing up teams, so people that you maybe hadn't worked with either ever or anytime recently, you get to work with on something like this. So last year's submission, we built something that was kind of bigger and bolder than the previous years, which seems to be a trend that we're going for to some degree. And we started off really early wanting to use fabric. We knew that we wanted to incorporate that in some way, and then started asking the question about, if we're going to use fabric, how do we suspend it, or how do we stiffen it? So really nice time to kind of get our hands dirty and just get into the process and the nitty-gritty of how we can make it happen. We ended up finding a product that stiffens fabric, and some artists use it for large scale sculptures. We have the added pressure, of course, of the rain in Portland in the winter, which is almost a guarantee. So the next question is, how do we have fabric and this material that's hardening it and keep it dry? Will it work? Luckily, we got a great site. We got a site under a bridge, and that allowed us to suspend the piece. We partnered with a furniture maker in town that we sometimes work with on projects. They have a CNC machine that they were able to kind of not loan us, but loan us the services of, so that we could cut these kind of precision ribs that held the fabric. And here's the finished product here. So we wanted to leave you with a couple of thoughts. Some of these are observations and some of these are slightly aspirational in terms of ways that we see leadership really working, collaboration really working. So for the leadership portions of it, we see that our leaders are colleagues. We are all peers that respect one another. The leaders are supportive of the firm culture that we've established, and they model collaborative behavior. For the culture piece of it, we want a collaborative culture, but we're not always skilled at the practice, but I think it's recognition that it is a practice and we just have to kind of keep at it. Our culture has developed a way to have this kind of purposeful and honest conversations and a way to resolve conflict, which has been really helpful for us. And our project teams, our roles have some overlap and some gaps, but we found that this allows for some creativity and collaboration to kind of sneak in. We have social practices that make us unique and make us feel part of a community. And we have this process of design and of collaboration and of design collaboration. None of those are well defined, but it's the ambiguity that results in a more natural evolution of collaboration. And then in terms of projects and partners, we try to build on heritage relationships. We show care and respect at every level and every step along the way. And we try to assess opportunities for collaboration throughout the project, knowing that each project is unique. And after this, all of this, we would like to engage you and ask you to think about this question for a moment and to write something in the chat box for us. And the prompt is, what do you think is a key element for collaboration? We'll give you a moment to think about it and write your answer in the chat. Ego, that's a good one. Really requires leaving your ego behind. Psychological safety, that's another good one. Yeah, no judgment, trust, respect.
Practice.
Curiosity. Lots of listening, that's good. Having an open mind, open to new possibilities.
Candid conversation.
Candid conversation. That's great. Thanks everyone for participating in that. It's always nice to hear from the audience, even though we don't see you. We want to just end our portion of this on a quote. And this is something that resonated with us just in terms of kind of capturing the essence of collaboration. And this is Tim Gunn, he's the one who's on Project Runway for the US. And I understand it's different in Canada. So wanted to preface that way. That's who Tim Gunn is for us. But collaboration allows you to do the things that you wouldn't even conceive of doing individually.
I can learn to understand you much better if I can get familiar with the way you talk.
Cool.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was really interesting and really inspiring. We'll open it up if anyone has any questions. feel free to write them in the question and answer area or the chat. I have one to start out. I was wondering, when you started to implement this kind of more intense collaborative like framework and process within your office, was there ever discussion of like the business case for doing that? Because it seems like something that would take up a significant amount of everyone's time, really, like being on committees, spend time doing these CDP sessions. So how did you push that through to people who weren't just like on board for the good of it?
I'm happy to answer that one. I think that we started looking at it as a long game for the office, where we do a lot of things to grow staff, to improve firm culture, and this type of work and focusing on collaboration not only makes our office more sustainable in the long term, but it really helps the projects. And so while there's certainly sort of an investment in that work, I think that we are able to sort of see the benefit of that on the other side with less burnout and longer retention of staff and really better work. And it was, as we were looking towards growth and diversification of projects, like that was just really important. We couldn't do everything the same way forever. So it's been a really healthy thing for the firm, and I think it's netted great results within the firm and in the work.
Yeah, it certainly looks like it, and it seems like everyone is very happy there. We
all miss each other.
A really related question. I'd like to hear more about how leadership teams see the non-billable hours spent on the collaboration culture.
I will just chime in with one piece, which is that, I think, so we have, generally speaking, a set number of hours per week per employee that we're allowed to do kind of committee work and non-billable work. And so I think that's part of why some of these collaboration pieces take as long as they do to get implemented, is because we're kind of chipping away at them over a longer period of time, where there's no crew that's like solely working on this type of work. It's kind of everybody doing it during their non-billable kind of allowable hours each week.
Right, but it's great that those are allowable hours, not just kind of your own volunteer hours or something. Yeah.
I think there's also a piece of just soft skill development that's really crucial to practicing architecture on a team and in big projects. And those skills can be hard, especially, when you're on deadline and in a discipline that can be very intense. Being intentional about carving out space to actually develop those skills, I think, makes us better professionals and makes the firm more robust in the long run.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask about that also, whether you provide like communications training or kind of that type of skill set specifically, or if it's just learn as you go.
So I think one of the reasons that we have brought around the studio drop-in series that Yuki talked about was for those individuals who might not get time to present on a project externally to clients. We're trying to create a forum in the office where you can practice presenting the work, presenting the issues with the work, presenting ideas internally to sort of bolster that skill set.
Great. Well, I don't see any other questions. If anyone does have a question, it just appeared. What are some top qualifications you are looking for in a great candidate?
Does one of you want to take that?
Sure, I can start on that. I think that we that's kind of another part of the process that we are always examining, is like, how do we attract the best candidates? How do we how do we bring them to Portland? How does that all work? And then once we look at their materials, it's really like, how do we have a system for evaluation that is consistent in the firm? Because it's hard we're also kind of tag teaming some of those efforts within the leadership group. So creating some sort of consistency for evaluation. But I think it's of course looking at design skills and understanding how would they plug into the firm in terms of coming in. We don't hire for specific projects. We have a habit of we want to hire just the right people. It doesn't have to do with exact timing, and that has worked well for us. But really, it's about thinking, what will this person bring to a Holst, but also what will Holst bring to this person? And so it's like this reciprocal relationship that we try to view it in, to see, like, will they be happy when we're like doing the deep dive into collaboration or into equity or whatever it may be, because then we know that we'll have a better like partnership with that person.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And actually nice, because that echoes some things we heard from a recent event as well, where people are really looking for the right personal fit versus a sort of specific design skill. And it seems to be a nice trend in practices now. Okay, maybe this might be our last question. Do you think being a woman-owned practice contributes to the success of being a collaborative organization?
I would like to think so. I think having not necessarily being woman-owned, but having diversity in our ownership, I have to credit even our male partners. I mean, they're just as much a part of the collaborative conversation and pushing this process forward. I do think having diversity in the office of all sorts is really important, and so having female ownership is part of it. It's not that common, but I'm not sure if we can credit that for the collaborative environment more than just everyone at Holst. So
yeah, at a certain point, it just every little piece is contributing to that.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed looking at all your projects in more depth and hearing about how you have evolved over the years. And I know you said people could connect over email if they have a burning question they didn't want to ask here. And I hope that Holst stays connected with women in architecture. We'll certainly be following you.
Wonderful. Thank you for the
Thanks,
opportunity.
Jessica.
This was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thanks very much.